What steroidal hormones would shut your system down?
1,000 milligrams of testosterone with 500 milligrams of nandrolone decoinate with
What's up, guys? Derek, moreplates188.com. Today we are going to be reacting to the same episode of the Joe Rogan podcast again. So this is Dr. Mark Gordon, and the reason why is because more timestamps have been sent to me. This one is the HPTA and Clomid one that, I had already been sent. Actually, technically, it's just more people have sent it to me since then. So there's a lot of demand to cover it, and I don't know, I haven't even listened to it. So I've just gone up to the part where he says he was dealing with guys who took a bunch of anabolic steroids, like high doses, like a gram of test, half a gram of nandrolone decanoate, and then he would deal with fixing their HPTA, after coming off. So again, the same rules as last time. We have to keep the clips to like 11 seconds at the most, or else the copyright system kind of like picks it up. So bear with me while I do very, very frequent interjections, and perhaps sometimes not even in a logical manner. Sometimes I may have to pause just to have a pause in there for the sake of not screwing up the algorithm. So that is just how it works with these high budget podcasts. So bear with me here and let's get into it.
So these are guys that just wreck their system.
They wrecked their system, and someone that I had worked with in my inception of treating them, which I was totally against.
Okay, so it sounds like he is about to say he's totally against treating them, but these are guys that basically wreck their HPTA by using super physiological doses of exogenous androgens.
Use of anabolic steroids, because if you ate well, exercised, and you should be able to make your own hormones, and I learned different. Certain people that just didn't.
That's true. Some people just genetically are going to be inferior. A lot of lifestyle and diet choices, though, are also going to play into your hormone production at the end of the day. A lot of environmental factors, perhaps even. Sleep hygiene. There's a lot of shit that goes into it nowadays that goes overlooked.
So we started using beta HCG, using things like Clomid to try and turn their system back on. So
that's a pretty common approach, to restarting the HPTA. Oftentimes you'll use a LH mimic like HCG. Not that there's really any other traditional ones that are often used, but there's HMG, recombinant LH, which most people don't actually look at. But HCG is a pretty common go-to, stimulate the Leydig cells. And then Clomid is a selective estrogen receptor modulator that prevents the negative feedback whilst using, the HCG would also keep you shut down. It's not something that actually commonly overlooked, is the fact that HCG keeps your HPTA shut down. So even though it's naturally signaling your body to produce natural testosterone, you're still producing negative feedback via a synthetic means, essentially. And then with Clomid, though, you would ideally be, if you're stimulating natural testosterone production with an LH mimic, you're not going to have gonadotropin spiking up, because you have this consistent feedback coming from an exogenous source of an LH mimic. It's not actual LH. So that's what I mean by it keeps you shut down. You're not going to have that, downturn of hormone diminishment, which then will stop the negative feedback, which will then kick up GnRH production to the pituitary, to LH and FSH, blah, 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 because we are using an LH mimic. So you're basically bypassing the whole system. And then Clomid binds to estrogen receptors and acts as a selective estrogen receptor modulator to prevent negative feedback, in order to trick your brain into thinking it's estrogen deprived, essentially, which will then make your body, produce the GnRH, kick down to the pituitary, LH and FSH get picked up and sent down to, get produced and sent down to the testes.
I was exposed to it. And then 2014, we started a project trying to find the lowest possible dose of clomiphene citrate that would stimulate their own production of luteinizing hormone to stimulate their testicular functioning of testosterone.
So obviously that sounds like a good idea, because Clomid is not side effect free. In fact, it is quite riddled with issues. When you start binding up estrogen receptors with something that can be an antagonist in certain tissues, it can be quite problematic in certain aspects, whether that be ocular health, whether that be neurological health, cardiovascular health, whatever it is. It kind of depends on the SERM of choice, of course, but obviously, you know, anyone who's used Clomid can probably attest to the fact that you don't feel super good when you're using it. It's like one of the most moody compounds there is, and it kind of sucks to use. So, and it can have some, you know, concerning issues in a side effect context. So finding the lowest effective dose obviously makes sense.
And we found a pattern that seemed to work best. And the beauty of it was it wasn't a daily tablet. If you look at the studies in women who were on daily tablets, they had, you know, complaints of mood swings and bloating and
So he says it's not a daily tablet, which is, yeah, that's true. You know, it has a long half-life, so it does not need to be taken every single day for stable blood serum concentrations.
some ocular kind of problems. But that was daily dosing of between 50 to 200 milligrams of Clomid. We use 25, 50 milligrams every 72 hours.
Okay, so with the half-life of, I think it's 5 days, yeah, that makes every 72 hours, yeah, you're going to get less concentration buildup. You're going to have less overall drug burden. So it's not just like your dosing schedule is better because it's not every day. Rather, it's the overall drug burden is just much lower.
That's what we were able to define, that was the dosing that worked very well to get optimal levels of testosterone. So
Why does it need to be spaced out for 72 hours?
So, okay, well, that's a very good question, and I'll see what he has to say.
because the half-life of clomiphene is 98 days, and the actual stimulation of the testicles is like 32 days.
Okay, so I don't know where he got that number from. What do you say? Over 90 days for Clomid half-life? That's like longer than the fucking like WADA detection time, I think, in the urine. I think the half-life, like I said, I think it's 5 days, and then, you know, 5 half-lives would be, you know, you're looking at like 25 to 30 days probably max before it's like fully out of your system essentially. So, or at least enough to have like a pharmacologic effect to a significant degree. So, I don't know. Let's hear why he thinks that.
So even though you didn't take the pill for 72 hours, you still had the momentum of producing.
He said days, he meant hours, 92 hours.
Okay, so this guy is interjecting to correct him, presumably, because that would make a bit more sense if it was in the 90 hours, you know, because that would be closer to 5 days, right? It's not quite 5 days, but it would be much closer than fucking 90 plus days.
No, 92 days. Yeah, it's 7 times 14, okay? 98 days. 7 times 14 there. It's a 14-day half-life times 7 until it goes the peak.
Okay, bro, where are we getting these pharmacokinetics from? This is like way the fuck off. So it went from a, what do you say, like a 90 something day half-life to now has a 14-day half-life, and it's multiplied by 7 to reach stable blood serum concentrations. Is that what you're about to tell me?
Peak and then becomes 0. That's the math behind it.
So when you
I don't get the math, dude. I don't get it, because that makes no sense to me. Maybe I'm wrong. Somebody explain in the comments. To me, I would look at it like, I'm pretty sure it's a 5-day half-life, and it would be 5 half-lives for stable blood serum concentrations, and the opposite would be true for elimination. So I don't know where I don't know where 90 plus days is coming from. So, or even his speculative half-life of 14 days times 7, like, I don't know, man. Pharmacokinetics, I feel like he might be off on this one.
taking it constantly, you're overwhelming your system. Is that what's happening?
Well, what
It would just be less overall drug burden. If you have something with a really long half-life, obviously it's going to accumulate pretty significantly. So it's not really necessary to take it every single day, you know, because it can still be more than enough in your system to have the pharmacologic effects you're looking for, and there's less buildup, you know? So I don't see I'll hear what he has to say.
what happens is you're constantly driving the pituitary to make luteinizing hormone, which could put you at risk for developing enlargement of the cells, which we haven't seen yet.
Okay, so he's saying if you're driving your pituitary and redlining it, then you have risk of enlargement of the cells. I don't know, man. Like, is he talking about like Leydig cell desensitization, like the thing that everyone speculates why you shouldn't take HCG long term? And this is like basically been debunked. Like, I'm not really sure what he's referring to here, but like, if you had a 90+ day half-life of something, are you not contradicting what you're saying right now? Like, you're basically saying you don't want it in your system constantly, because then you're redlining your pituitary, which can cause the issue, whatever this is, but you're using a drug every 3 days that has a 90-something day half-life. Like, how would that not do the exact thing you're saying is what you're trying to avoid here? Like, I don't understand this part at all.
Okay, because we space it every 72 hours.
You don't mean science in general. You just mean you with
In the pace, right. Well, it took 3 years to come up with this pattern, and we have tons of laboratory results to show.
Okay, so presumably this is a protocol he is kind of like, I don't know, kind of determined as ideal himself rather than it being like a industry standard.
The benefit by pulsing it, we did every day for 5 days a week. We did every other day. We did Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then we came to this every third day, 72 hours between it. And the results were optimal.
So if you had like a 90+ day half-life, you would think you would space it out even more than that if it was like you wanted the least redlining of your pituitary, if that was even a concern. So I'm just lost, dude. Like, I don't get the pharmacokinetic assessment here whatsoever, or the strategy either.
Now, what do you do for bodybuilders? Because bodybuilders, they take clomiphene citrate to try to kick their production back up of testosterone.
Right.
Would that be a different situation?
So I thought he already touched on, he uses, I thought he said for bodybuilders who are blasting their faces off, he uses HCG and Clomid.
Well, what I believe and how I practice is if they're on anabolic steroids and you give them Clomid concurrently, not at the end, you give it concurrently, what it does is keep...
Okay, so he's about to talk about using a SERM on cycle essentially. So this should be very interesting.
Keeps the tone of the circuit between the hypothalamus, pituitary, and the gonads still working. When you give testosterone alone, what happens is...
Okay, so he's basically implying that if you're on cycle, if you occupy the estrogen receptor with a SERM and you trick your brain into thinking it's estrogen deficient, you can basically skip over the circulating or the fucking system you have in your body that determines that you need to produce androgens, and basically trick it into not realizing it's also on anabolics. That's what he is asserting. And this is interesting because there are a lot of individuals who, for example, on SARM cycles, they will use things like N-clomiphene concurrently with their SARMs in order to keep their HPTA functioning at a high level and keep their testosterone levels high whilst also running these SARMs at the same time. It's very seldom that you'll see a guy on exogenous anabolics at a super physiological dose, though, who does this strategy. So this is interesting to hear, and I don't necessarily think it's a good idea, to be honest. I would rather... well, anyway, I'll let him give his opinion before I interject more.
You shut off the brain's sensing, and you shut down the pituitary, and you shut down the testicles, because the testicles, the cells called Leydig cells, they need to be stimulated. Otherwise...
So this sort of gets into the hypothesis of, should you be using HCG intermittently to keep the Leydig cells stimulated so that you don't have, fibrosis and atrophy long term that is, like semi or fully, irreversible potentially. That's sort of a debated topic, and a lot of people I respect in the community do actually think intermittently, like at least every once in a while, you should be using something to stimulate the Leydig cells, so then you keep at least, not just like because you don't want small nuts, but because it's like if you don't use it, you lose it is the idea. So it's like from a fertility context, if you're blasting and cruising for years on end and you don't do anything in between that, decade plus to stimulate your testicles to actually do something, then you theoretically should just build up a bunch of permanently prevent them from working again. But again, the disconnect between the HPTA is the thing he's discussing here, because I'm sure he knows HCG is used on cycle as the main practice of which to stimulate the Leydig cells. People are not usually blocking estrogen receptors using a SERM and preventing, 17 beta estradiol from binding to the ER and providing neuroprotective effects, cardioprotective effects, etc., and muscle growth potentially too. no one's usually doing that on cycle. So it's kind of weird to, I would think he would have been more of a fan of HCG concurrently rather than Clomid, to be honest. Like, that's kind of wild to hear.
Otherwise, they scar or atrophy. So if you've been on injectable testosterone for long periods of time without taking a break or giving your system something to stimulate the production.
Okay, yeah, so he's basically saying exactly what I just said, but it's just interesting how he wants to use Clomid to do that.
What'll happen is they'll be gone and you can't recover it. And I've seen, I've had some guys in the past that there was nothing we can do to recover their testicular functioning.
So as far as like the probability that you're going to have like permanent loss of function, like typically from what we see, oftentimes it's individuals that are not giving themselves enough time to recover, are not using a proper fertility protocol, and or they're one of the minority of individuals who is already like borderline like not going to be fertile anyways. They might have been infertile like even prior to fucking using gear. Like most people, if they use gear and they were like very, very fertile prior, they will be able to recover to an adequate enough level post use that they will be able to have kids. Like how many, pro bodybuilders, how many top bodybuilders, how many amateur bodybuilders have kids, like even by accident when they're on gear, like decades into their use. So that's not to say that that's a good thing though, or you should do that. And I would highly advise against trying to have a kid when you are on boatloads of synthetic drugs, to be honest. Who knows what kind of epigenetic changes could occur from that. But anyways, him saying you're pretty much like implying there's a strong chance that you are never going to be fertile again if you don't use like Clomid on cycle. I don't know, man. Like it seems a bit risky to imply, but again, it's also risky to imply otherwise potentially. You never know, to imply that you shouldn't be using something to stimulate the Leydig cells. So I'm not saying you should do one or the other, but to me, it seems a bit like wild to be saying like people should be using Clomid while they're on gear.
Cells because they burnt out.
And is this from bodybuilding or is this from injectable testosterone like TRT?
Anyone who's taking testosterone, even pellets.
So asserting that it's the same level of risk between a synthetic anabolic that can be, way more toxic to certain cells than bioidentical testosterone, I feel like is a bit off the mark. But, there's obviously an infertility chance potentially. You never know when you use anything that shuts down your HPTA.
Pellets.
Pellets, like they do like put in your butt. Or something.
Correct.
Not in your butthole.
No.
You fucking idiots.
They put it where...
That was, reminds me of the video I did a while ago. It was like the stupidest question I've ever been asked. And it was like a guy who was talking about injecting like up his literal fucking asshole. Good times. Funny story.
Wherever they put it. But also topical testosterone, that's because dihydrotestosterone, I said it was 4 times more anabolic than testosterone.
It's fucking wrong, dude. Stop saying that.
Is 3 times stronger at shutting down your regulatory mechanism in the brain. So that's why I haven't used topical testosterone for 10, 15 years.
So I don't know why he would say DHT is 3 times higher likelihood to shut you down. Is that what he's saying? Because if anything, if you're using something that is not a substrate for aromatase, you would think, okay, well, if negative feedback is literally induced also through estrogen receptors, hence the point of using a SERM as per your own theory concurrently on cycle, then using something that's not a substrate for aromatase, if anything, you would think would be the least suppressive. At least I would think. So I'm not really sure what he's getting at. And I don't know how you would quantify that anyways. Like DHT is 3 times more suppressive. Like where are you getting the statistic from? Like I don't understand.
10, 12 years because of it's so damaging.
Isn't it also a problem like if you have a partner and you start getting frisky, you might get it on them and then your significant other grows one of them porn stashers?
So yeah, I guess that's possible. Yeah, that's the annoying thing about topicals because it's like it can get on stuff,
Yeah, that's right. It's because they too will have the secondary effects of testosterone. Our skin has the converting enzyme that converts it to dihydrotestosterone.
Yeah, so this is where the theory comes in that if you apply testosterone cream scrotally, then you can get a disproportionate spike in DHT levels because of the density of 5-alpha reductase in the local tissue. And this is also why we theorize potentially on the reverse side of the spectrum that if you use topical 5-AR inhibitors, you may indeed be able to leverage some kind of disproportionate decrease in scalp DHT simply via local enzymatic activity in the tissue.
And that's the reason why women who used to be given topical testosterone to put on their wrist would accidentally smear it onto their arms, and they get darkening of their skins.
So yeah, putting it on your arm is definitely not a good spot in my opinion. If you want, like for a girl to experience viralization from testosterone, like that would be expected if they're using more than they need, or if they aren't even needing it. But testosterone is a viable therapy, in my opinion, in certain menopausal women who may otherwise need it, but it's a bit of a side topic.
So if they're light skinned, light lanugo hair, it would get dark and they'd get a patch. Also, DHT can cause them to grow hair behind their knuckles on their hands.
Attractive.
Absolutely. Just take the razor.
Like that.
Yeah.
A lot of guys like a gal.
That's called hairsuit, right?
Huh. So yeah, not a whole lot to comment there. Just doing my my fucking roundabout interjection here to not get popped by the good old algo.
Yeah, not good.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you started developing this protocol for treating soldiers and different people with TBIs, was there some...
All right, so he's about to talk about TBI, and this might be a whole separate topic for another video. We're at 30 minutes on my camera right now, so I guess we'll see what happens next.
Adjusting? Did you have to kind of figure it out as you went along? I mean, how many studies did you have to read to try to put together this?
Yeah, I have over 8,000 studies in my collection on Mendeley.
Jesus, that is quite impressive.
Where I keep all the articles. And, I go through 10, 15 articles a week right now, and every Sunday I send out to our journal club one of the key articles.
Okay, well, that's good to see. This guy is, this is something, unfortunately, that a lot of the medical community does not do. They do not stay up to date on the research, and then they get aged out of the literature significantly to the point where it's almost impossible to even trust certain individuals' advice because they haven't read up on anything for the past 20 years since they were in med school. And even when they were in there, they covered the specific topic of endocrinology for a very small period of time, potentially. So it's cool that this guy is on top of it all, because not many people are.
That he reads every Sunday, right?
Yeah. How many articles for your last book did you have to read?
1,600 went into the last book. 1,600 that I documented. But
that's a fucking lot, guys. It's a lot. That's my useful interjection comment for interrupting the copyright system.
There were a lot of articles that I read, just the abstract and the introduction and conclusion, and not the gobbledygook in the middle that were added. But as I said,
okay, I'm going to start jumping around a little bit here because it sounds like we're getting into like, how'd you research this? How'd you study? How'd you learn so much? And it's like, you guys don't want me interjecting on that. It's kind of not relevant to give feedback. So let's see some of this other stuff.
Hormone. But it turned out that inflammation is the real key, is the real problem. And DHT dropped inflammation. So it wasn't, right out there obvious that that's what we were doing until Andrew and I got together, and tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 1.
Okay, this sounds like a tangent into your immune system and certain parameters that may influence your immune status. So this could definitely be a separate video topic. If there is any other timestamps you guys want me to look at, I sincerely do not have time to watch this full podcast, so I'm basically just going off of highly requested sections. So if you guys want to shoot me anything else from this that you thought was interesting or worth touching on, let me know. But I think that was a good little discussion on SERMs used on cycle, how your HPTA regulates itself, how exogenous hormones keep you shut down, how, fertility metrics, things of this nature. So interesting podcast for sure with a lot of relevant tidbits. And right up my alley. So cool suggestion from everyone. And thank you for sending me this. And I guess let's see if there's anything else in here. But otherwise, thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplates.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreplates_moredates, Facebook, Snapchat, Bitch, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. My TRT clinic, it's all telemedicine from the comfort of your own home. It's all Skype, FaceTime, Zoom, whatever's most convenient for you. And you can meet up with my patient care coordinators who have been carefully vetted and know endocrinology in elaborate detail, and will facilitate getting your bloods drawn and then kind of transition you over to talking with our doctors who are also vetted in the most up-to-date research that you will often not really find, to be honest. Like, it's actually very difficult to get medical assistance nowadays that is actually actively trying to stay on top of research, unfortunately. So it's always cool to see a guy bringing cutting edge information to the forefront, like Dr. Mark Gordon and other individuals and whatnot. And yeah, so anyways, that's if you want to check that out, it's in the description below, as well as my lab test panels that I've designed myself for basic health parameters, endocrine parameters, metabolic, etc. Everything that I would get as a a basic screening, a comprehensive screening. There's a lot of different panels I have designed for specific reasons, depending on your budget and exactly what you were trying to assess as far as your health status. And then anything else I'm associated with as well, Gorilla Mind, nootropic formulas, Gorilla Mode, pre-workout formulas I designed myself from scratch, and everything else, all video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.